Hello everybody, in my last video I went over the moral argument for the existence of God, and in this video I'll be responding to a video made by RationalityRules, in which he lays out some objections to the moral argument. Please remember that just like my response video to Cosmic Skeptic, I'm not making this video because of some dislike I have for RationalityRules. And also, please know that nothing I say in this video is meant to be taken in any kind of attacking way. Also, I would just ask that if you enjoy the video, click the like button. And if you really enjoy it, you can subscribe to keep up with my newest videos. So, with that said, let's get into the video.
When debating with a theist, there are certain subjects that are bound to come up, and morality is most certainly one of them. It is of course raised in numerous ways, but it almost always boils down to the assertion that if there isn't a God, then there is no objective and absolute morality. That murder is only immoral because we currently agree that it is immoral.
I'm a little hesitant about the fact that you use the phrase absolute morality, because in philosophy, absolute and objective morality refer to two different things. But I'll look past it now because I have a slight feeling that I'll be bringing it up a bit later. RationalityRules lays out the premises of the moral argument and then goes on to say that no proponent of the argument commits all of the fallacies he'll bring up all at one time, but that certain people use certain fallacies in certain situations.
The first flaw I'd like to raise is that premise 1 is completely unsubstantiated.
Well, I completely disagree with that. As I said in my last video, the word objective in the moral argument simply means independent of human belief. On atheism, humans don't have any kind of intrinsic value, and you can't refute this by saying, well, humans have value because we place value on them, because that ultimately is just to admit that morality is ultimately dependent on human belief and opinion. That is, humans have value because we say they have value. That's subjective. If human opinion and belief changed over time to the point where we no longer saw humans as having value, then it would follow that the humans of that time really actually don't have any value. So if you want to be an atheist and still affirm that morality is objective, then there's got to be some kind of non-human foundation for morality. But what could that foundation be? Some people have said that reason and logic itself is the foundation for morality, that morality simply just flows naturally out of reason and logic. This was the position of Immanuel Kant. But this is obviously wrong. As the 18th century philosopher David Hume pointed out, we can't make the jump from what is the case to what ought to be the case. That is, reason tells us what is and what must be, but it doesn't tell us what ought to be the case. It's like a map. A map can tell you perfectly how to get to your destination, but a map can't tell you what your destination should be. The map is only useful if you've already got some kind of destination in mind. Put another way, reason is always descriptive, but it is never prescriptive. Some people have said that conscious well-being is the foundation for morality. The atheist Sam Harris says, quote, "If we should do anything in this universe, if we ought to do anything, if we have a moral duty to do anything, it's to avoid the worst possible misery for everyone." But this completely misses the point. He says, if we ought to do anything, but there's no reason given as to why on atheism we ought to do anything in the first place, and that's the whole question. And again, the moment you appeal to human opinion or belief as the reason why we ought to do something, you're admitting that morality is ultimately subjective. So in my view, premise 1, far from being unsubstantiated, is completely justified. if atheism is true, then there is no objective morality.
The first flaw I'd like to raise is that premise 1 is completely unsubstantiated, making the entire argument a non sequitur.
Well, hang on now. Even if premise 1 is unsubstantiated or unjustified, that doesn't mean the argument is a non sequitur. As you yourself put up, an argument is a non sequitur if the conclusion doesn't follow from the premises. For example, I have 2 legs, I have 2 arms, therefore I have 2 eyes. In this argument, all 3 statements are true. The 2 premises and the conclusion are true. But the argument is still a non sequitur because the conclusion that I have 2 eyes in no way follows from the fact that I have 2 legs and 2 arms. The moral argument, however, is perfectly logically valid. If the 2 premises are true, then the conclusion must be true. What you're doing here is simply denying that the first premise is true.
It in no way logically follows that only a specific God can be responsible for the existence of objective moral values.
Well, now I'm just kind of confused. The argument doesn't say that a specific God has to. Well, now I'm just kind of confused. The argument doesn't say that a specific God is or has to be the foundation for morality. It could be the Christian God, it could be the Muslim God, it could be some God that's not represented by any religion. What the argument shows is that there just has to be at least some God for there to be objective morality.
It in no way logically follows that only a specific God can be responsible for the existence of objective moral values, unless the proponent is literally defining objective moral values to mean moral values, principles, and duties that are declared by God. And if they are doing this, then they are including the claim of their argument within their premise, which is begging the question.
You're certainly right that the argument would be question-begging if the phrase objective moral values meant moral values that are declared by God. But that's not how the phrase objective moral values is defined in the argument. Like I said previously, the word objective in the argument simply means independent of human belief. It's the idea that some things are good or bad independent of whether we think they're good or bad. As William Lane Craig often brings up, it's the idea that the Holocaust was bad, regardless of the fact that the Nazis thought it was good, and it would still have been bad even if they brainwashed everyone on the planet to believe that the Holocaust was good. This is how the word objective is defined in the argument, and as such, the argument in no way begs the question in favor of God.
To illustrate this further, simply replace the word God with Cthulhu, and you'll quickly appreciate how absurd this argument is. It's either a non sequitur or it's begging the question.
I don't really get why this example is even used. The first premise of this argument is obviously false, but it's not analogous to the first premise of the moral argument. There's no reason at all to think that this modified first premise is true, whereas I think there's very good reason to think that the first premise of the moral argument is true. And as I showed before, the moral argument isn't a non sequitur, and it doesn't beg the question. There's much more to his video, but for the sake of time, I'm going to end the video here and continue in my next video with part 2 of my response. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, then without a doubt, share it with someone you know, and subscribe to keep up with my newest videos. If you feel like you have something to say, leave it in the comments. I love getting comments, whether it's constructive criticism, or you just like the video, or it's ideas for future videos. It's great. It lets me know that my videos are actually making an impact of some sort. So stay tuned for part 2 of my response, and I'll see you then.